Okay. Hello.
Hi.
How are you doing?
It's raining. It's pouring.
It is absolutely pouring, which is very surprising.
It is.
We were out this morning and it was raining while it was actually really sunny out.
Mm-hmm.
Looked around for a rainbow, couldn't find one. Looked for leprechauns, couldn't find one.
Yeah. Today is my 2-year anniversary with WizardPhD. I started this channel 2 years ago.
Today being
the 8th.
December 8th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back in 2017.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride.
So in December 2017, that was like a little bit after we finished our PhDs, for real.
It was, yeah. We were in Tucson.
Yeah.
Basically finished a semester probably. That was probably like what the spark
to the
was,
end of
like
the first
finals-ish,
semester.
so you were pretty much done besides some grading. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, how does it feel?
I don't know.
You're probably going to, I don't know, maybe reflect in a different video or something.
Yeah. I mean, 2 years is a decent amount of time, I'd say. I don't know.
Yeah, it's more than decent. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's very exciting.
Yeah.
And your semester now is almost over, speaking of.
Yes. Very close.
The timeline is pretty similar.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's exciting. We're just hanging around here for the holiday season.
Mm-hmm.
A couple more episodes in this book, and then book synopsis type one.
Book synopsis,
bigger one.
and then book 2, probably
On to
starting
book
in
2.
2020.
Probably, yeah. Maybe the end of.
Yeah, we'll see
Yeah.
the schedule.
Because you're like on break, so we may even just record and then not put them out.
Yeah.
But yeah. Good. Anything else going on?
No, not really. I don't
I
know.
don't think so either. Cruising along.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, are you? Juan's ready then?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay.
My wand is ready.
Juan's ready. Almost burped.
Oh.
I didn't. I did not. Okay, everybody, turn to page 242, The Forbidden Forest. I looked it up this time. I didn't mess up. Today's lesson is called Uncloaked and Exposed. We'll have to have a chat about that because I know you were thinking along different lines.
Yes.
So. A synopsis, rather long. The chapter starts with Harry and Hermione despairing over their fate. A furious Professor McG arrives with Neville, and the three are punished by losing 150 points for Gryffindor and getting detention. The other Gryffindors are indignant, and Harry studies and keeps his head down. One night he overhears an afraid Quirrell muttering to himself, and the trio fear that Snape is closer than ever. As they consider ways to thwart Snape, Harry and Hermione receive notice of their detention. That night, Filch marches them down toward the Forbidden Forest, where they are to meet Hagrid. Hagrid shows them a puddle of unicorn blood and instructs them of their mission to find the injured creature. Harry, Hermione, and Hagrid encounter 2 enigmatic centaurs before Hagrid runs off to help Malfoy and Neville. Finally, Harry, Malfoy, and Fang find the unicorn dead and being feasted on by some being. Harry doubles over in pain as the third centaur drives away the danger. Despite the indignancy of his fellow centaurs, Firenze allows Harry to ride him to safety, while disclosing his suspicion that the feeding being was none other than Lord Voldemort, biding his time before acquiring the Sorcerer's Stone. After an exhausting adventure, Harry returns to his bed to find his invisibility cloak waiting for him.
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah. Okay, for people that are connected to my social media, you're going to vote. Is it Firenze or is it Firenze? How do you say this? How do you say this name? Because
I have always said Firenze.
Yeah.
I got to show this card, though, because we got this super cool card.
Harry Potter trading card game.
Riding the centaur. Not focusing very great, but there it is. Maybe we can put a photo up later. I feel like we got to get the value out of it. It's a shiny one. Man,
the
nice.
hollow.
But yeah, so I went with Uncloaked and Exposed. You were thinking along the lines of war.
Yeah, because so over and over we get the line, Mars is bright tonight, several times.
Yeah.
To which Hagrid gets irritated.
I know, I love that scene.
I get it. All right, Mars is bright.
Yeah, nice to see you too.
But Mars was named Mars for the god of war.
Yeah.
And so that's part of the idea of, or the symbolism of why would Mars being bright draw the attention of centaurs, where it's clearly that they're very distracted by it. It's like they're kind of like they keep getting gravitated towards the sky, looking up at the sky, even as Hagrid is like trying to tell them, hey, there's this situation. Have you seen anything that's unusual? And they're like, yeah, it's unusually bright. And there's kind of this like miscommunication. But even Hagrid acknowledges like with centaurs that they seem to know things. And yeah, so there's this like mystique that's about it.
The scene with the 3 centaurs and Harry is rather fascinating. I mean, the way that they're talking amongst each other and like the perspective of Bane on what it's supposed to be like to be a centaur, that they're supposed to kind of rise above it. And they're like, I forget exactly the quote, but he's like, we are concerned with like the future, basically.
Right. I wondered if part of it was like, okay, we can read things that other people can't. Like we can read and get information from the sky, from studying the skies, and maybe there's this like loyalty where you're not supposed to try to interfere with what is told to you. I don't know.
Yeah, or they care more about like trends than any specific event. So like the whole Mars and war thing going on, and then I think Ferenzi is sort of like pushing on that pretty severely and being like, well, yes, you know, my favorite quote was, or have the planets not let you in on that secret? I set myself against what is lurking in this forest, Bane, yes, with humans alongside me if I must.
Yeah.
He's kind of like, well, yeah, it's fine to sort of speak broadly and have these ideas of a war coming, but it's in the forest right now. You know what it is. I know what it is. I'm going to do something, and you're going to proclaim to be, you know, above it.
Yeah, it's very interesting because it's not explained at all in this chapter, but the centaurs have this, you get a sense of centaurs, like the way that she writes, it is very mysterious, but also this kind of like, it's this, you know, group, this culture that we know, it's not like the wizarding or the wizards where we have been seeing how they interact. It's very different, or it seems very different.
Even her language, they're very formal with Hagrid, right? How are you? It's like nobody in the book says that type of thing, because that's not how we like really interact that
she
frequently.
Like puts in these like pauses, or it's communicated that it's like slow, and that there's this pause that keeps happening in the duration of the conversation. So, of course, because I don't know, this entire book I've been going to Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, because there's a lot. I mean, we're being introduced into the wizarding world, and so there's a lot with beasts that we're being introduced, or that Harry especially is being introduced to.
Are centaurs in there?
Centaurs are in here, and there's a lot of history behind it, which might connect to our conversation about what we saw in the forest with the 3 centaurs and Harry. So centaur history, they are intelligent and capable of speech. So by general definition, they should not be classified as a beast, but they are, because they requested to have a beast classification. So this is in the introduction to Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, where there's, I actually read it this time instead of skimmed it. There's a lot about the designation. So it started off with the wizards and the Wizards Council trying to have this like inter-being relations sort of thing of like not just wizards, but we have other beings like, I don't know, so we have trolls,
Merfolk.
we have merfolk, yeah. And so trying to make these connections, and so then there's this issue of like, okay, well, who's a being and who's a beast? So there's this like designation. And so initially it was that beings were anyone who could walk on 2 legs. And then, so that was very broad. And so then you had like pixies, and like, it was just chaos at this first meeting. And so over the years, it kept getting refined. And so at some point it was these 2 qualifications. So being of human intelligence, or of that status.
Like a sentience type stuff.
And being capable of speech. So being capable of communicating or even caring about wizarding laws to begin with. Like you would have to be invested somehow and be able to communicate. And part of it in the intro, so it says that in a footnote, the centaurs objected to some of the creatures with whom they were asked to share being status with, such as hags and vampires, and declared that they would manage their own affairs separately from wizards. And a year later, the mer people made the same request. The Ministry of Magic accepted their demands reluctantly. So they are not classified as beings, even though technically they should be.
Based on the definition, but they've requested
not to be.
That's fascinating.
And, sure. Yeah, well, because it's like all this like politics, right? So like why is it, that's why I was also looking up hags and vampires, and it's just interesting. Like their reasoning is, I don't want to be in the same category as these other beings.
I find it impressive and interesting that, you know, if you create this type of characterization of a being, then kind of by virtue of that, you are saying that they should have the right to leave. Mm-hmm. It's kind of interesting in that way, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's like, precisely because you've classified them as a being, they should be able to say like, I don't agree with this, and I'm gonna express myself in a different way, or express who we are differently. Yeah.
Well, also, so in the entry,
it does seem like a pretty fair. I mean, I guess like in some sense, it's like, well, okay, you're just being lumped together by this broad stroke stuff, but to say like, no, these things are not like us.
Yeah. Well, right. That they wanted to, and I don't know, maybe so going back to like the conversation, so maybe they just think, or I don't know, maybe they think that wizards just cause too much trouble for their own good. And they're kind of like, all right, we're just going to like live with ourselves, like in the forest, and like deal with our own things. We're just going to like study the stars. So in the entry, they're well versed in magical healing, divination, archery, and astronomy. They're also classified. The Ministry of Magic classification is 4 out of 5. And it says in a note there that it's not because that they're unduly aggressive, but because they should be treated with great respect. And there's also a note like along with mer people and unicorns. So there's something about, because unicorns come up of like, it's atrocious, like you should never commit this act of violence against a unicorn. And so it's very interesting because in the history of the wizarding world, there's a lot of this like hierarchical organization of like who has a status, who gets treated in a certain way, who gets respect, who is seen as lesser than.
It's also kind of fascinating. So they requested to be classified as a beast? Is that what you found?
It just says that they did not want the being status.
I see.
And so so they're classified as beast
by wizards. I see. Well, I was going to say something to the effect of that. It's interesting because Bane like criticizes Ferenzi like basically by demeaning him and calling him like a mule and a donkey, I think. And but it's a similar type of dynamic here where it's like, but if centaurs are like have this certain quality about them, then they should be able to, Ferenzi should be able to make the choice to be like, no, I'm going to help, I'm okay with this. It's not like an enslavement. I've invited this person onto my back for a purpose. You know, I put them there. They didn't put themselves there. Yeah.
Well, I should also note that in the history of this classification, mer people were not classified as beings in an earlier iteration, and centaurs were very upset about it because
they didn't have feet.
No, because they they speak Mermish. Like they don't. So part of the communication was when they were finally designated as beings, they had translators, and so it was like, okay, we will have this communication. It was more about like a willingness to communicate and having the resources to be able to communicate in a similar or shared language.
I think in a very future book, we learned that Dumbledore speaks Mermish. Yeah. Always impressive, Dumbledore.
Yeah, maybe he was a translator then. But yeah, so the centaurs were very upset in that earlier iteration and like kind of fought against that defining of being at the time. Right. Because, well, it seems that, they're like, oh, mer people should be involved in this, and they're not. So I don't know. It's just very interesting and complicated. And yeah, the comment about the mule made me wonder about this like tension of like feeling subservient to humans, or having that there's a history there. There's like a legacy, and so
I wonder what centaurs think about muggles. That would be an interesting thing to know about. I don't think it ever really comes up, but I could be wrong.
Yeah
Yeah,
because there's also stuff in here about wizards who think that muggles should be labeled as beasts.
Is there?
Yeah.
Interesting. We'll have to talk about that at some point. Maybe we'll do a special episode on that particular one, because I haven't read it.
Okay, first of all these kids get detention. How is it appropriate that it's like your detention will begin at 11 p.m. You're going into the Forbidden Forest to do work with Hagrid.
I love how she writes Hagrid there. Because she writes Hagrid as the like rationalization of this. And he's like, what would be, because Malfoy's like, I thought we were just going to be doing lines. And it's like, what's the point of that? We might as well put you to doing something like worthwhile if you've gotten in trouble, like almost some kind of, redemption. And it's kind of, there's some sense to it. I mean, like we talk about this in schools all the time of like, what is punishment and what is its role and how should you do it.
But the plan seems to be 11
p.m.
bizarre. Till dawn.
It's really
Filch
bizarre.
is like, I'll be back at dawn. What do you
intense.
expect? Them to go to not go to sleep?
It's super intense. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
What is this school? Oh, yeah. Because the other comment was, I think, Ronan, when he encounters Harry and Hermione, and Hagrid's like, oh, yeah, these are students. And he's like, oh, do you learn anything at this school?
A bit.
Oh, my God. I love that.
Guess that's better than nothing. Yeah.
Again, I felt like that was supposed to signal some sort of like, there's this like historical tension or something.
Sure.
There's this history between centaurs and wizards, and we don't know much about it, but there's interesting things to explore there.
Definitely. So my theme?
Yeah.
Uncloaked and Exposed. Well, I was thinking like the invisibility cloak is conspicuous in this chapter. I mean, the reason they're in trouble is because they've forgotten it. And then at the end they get it back. Yeah. Harry. And then besides that, like we also have this uncloaking to me of Voldemort, right? By Firenze, like being like, Harry, you've been thinking about this wrong. Yep. You're not seeing the whole picture. It's a very centaurish type thing. Being like, he himself is like, you're not looking at this the right way. Like, who would want this type of thing? Okay, like think about this logically. If something is willing to feast off of a unicorn and slay a unicorn, why would they be willing to do that? Why would they be doing that here? What is in, he just steps him right through it. It's pretty phenomenal. But I think it's also like, it's amazing to me. Why does Firenze know that the Sorcerer's Stone is in the school? It has always stuck out to me of like, how does he know that? Like, how does he know that it's up there?
Stars told him.
Hagrid probably told him.
Hagrid definitely told them.
Hagrid
told everyone except for Harry.
Yeah, he's got a banner on the back of his hut. It just says, Sorcerer's Stone this way.
That's funny.
Yeah, so I think like, but also Harry is feeling exposed, and he's also being exposed to like that he is an integral part of things, and he is the hero of his own story at this point, but he is also a part of something like very big. Right? And that needs to be unmasked for him somewhat. It's been a very Harry-centric book, as it should be, but like he's basically learning about himself the whole time. He has sort of concerns, but his concerns about the stone are really only because he doesn't like Snape. He thinks Snape would do something bad with it, but he hasn't really thought about like, well, what if it's neither of these two people? What if something completely different is going on here?
But he still thinks that Snape is trying to get it for Voldemort.
He does later, yeah.
He thinks that Snape is still involved.
Yeah, he does.
I don't know.
But did he think that before?
No, he thought that Snape was doing it for himself. But what I'm saying is that now he thinks that Snape is doing it for Voldemort. Yeah. That Snape is still involved because...
but it's still a shift.
The last chapter, you were kind of like, well, all of these teachers, like, why is it still Snape? All of these teachers, all of these whoever are part of guarding this or doing this. And
I was mostly playing around, though, with the idea of, like... her being J.K. Rowling's symbolism with the cloak here.
Yeah.
Starts, how could I have forgotten the cloak?
Right.
Don't have the cloak. You're exposed to the most danger you've ever been in. And then you get the cloak back. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of interesting because at the same time, this was the other thought that I was having, though I'm not sure if I've expressed it well or even tried yet, is like, we are also following, Voldemort is kind of uncloaked, but not quite. By the end of the chapter, like, and to the next chapter where Harry's still thinking about it wrong, he's still not quite getting it, what exactly is going on. Like, Voldemort's cloak is somewhat pulled back, but he pulls it, like, he doesn't fully expose himself as, like, who he is and where he is. And,
yes.
Right.
So, yeah, because, well, we don't even see, it's just this, like, oh, you see this, like, hooded figure, basically. You don't see anything about it.
But in this chapter, spoilers, we hear Quirrell muttering to himself, and Harry completely misinterprets it.
He thinks
he's talking about feasting on the unicorn. That was my take of what Quirrell is muttering to himself. He's talking to Voldemort about, like, I don't want to go back into the forest and kill the unicorn, right? But Voldemort is like, no, I need to feed again.
Yeah, so in that, I had to reread that paragraph again because, so Harry, like, hears the muttering, and then Quirrell comes out, and then Harry looks in, there's nobody inside, but he sees, like, a door ajar, and he, in his mind, is like, I would bet 12 Sorcerer's Stones that Snape, like, walked out of the room just then. Like, you have no evidence, dude. But that's kind of like, he was, like, picturing this scene of, okay, this is, like, what's happening. We still have blubbering Quirrell. Oh my gosh, we didn't even talk about Neville. Poor Neville. Oh, just so sweet. Just trying to, because he has, like, the whole book, I didn't realize, like, throughout this whole book, Neville is, he's doing more and more, brave things. And then he, like, is trying to go after them. And then he gets caught, and he's just crying through the night.
And also that scene, like, it always pulls at me when McGonagall also comes to the wrong conclusion about what's happening, and, like, oh, you've lied to Neville, and Neville's, like, all hurt, and it's like, oh my gosh.
Neville. I know.
No, like, it cost him something to do that. And he's in trouble. Yeah. And then it always cracks me up, too, that Hagrid splits them the way that he does. And I'm like, dude, just because they're your friends, like, you should probably go with Malfoy. Yeah. He probably doesn't want to. Malfoy's a dick.
Yeah, Malfoy. Oh, Malfoy.
He pulls a prank on Neville.
Poor Neville.
I think in the movie, is it true that it's just Harry and Malfoy? I think it is.
Well, I don't know. We just
or
watched
maybe
the
not.
scene.
Like,
I thought Hermione was there too.
You're right. I think, but Neville's not there. But they, like, split up differently.
I think Ron's in it instead.
I think
of
Ron
Neville.
is also there too because he's not.
Ron's in the hospital wing right now.
The old dragon bite.
So my favorite quote was, "Good luck, Harry Potter," said Ferenzi. "The planets have been read wrongly before now, even by centaurs. I hope this is one of those times." Because it's interesting because they're like later on at the end of the chapter when the three are like debriefing and Hermione is like noting how like or quoting McGonagall of like, oh, this sounds like fortune telling, which is like an imprecise branch of magic. And so it's interesting just even going back to like the centaur wizard relations.
Is the McGonagall stuff is the next chapter, I think.
No, the end of this chapter, they're debriefing what just happened. And Harry's telling them, like, this is what was told to me.
And McGonagall said fortune telling? I don't remember.
No, she didn't say that. Oh, okay. Hermione is referencing McGonagall.
Oh, I see.
McGonagall has said this to them before, so, about fortune telling. So, I don't know. It's just interesting.
It is. It's an interesting chapter. Being exposed to... It's kind of reminiscent of like when he first goes to Gringotts and he sees the goblins, and I love what J.K. Rowling does here. Like there's lore in our own world now of like goblins and centaurs, but they're like she writes them to be, they are on par with wizards. Like there's no clarity, there's no clear like saying like, no, these beings aren't powerful or something like that, or like you should look down on them. The way she writes them is they're different, but there's an ominousness about both of the races of like, the centaurs, like they're very intimidating, even just like in text form.
Yeah.
She describes them, and then like they're standoffish. They're like they're an enigma. Yeah.
There's also, I have another quote that's pretty, within the context of the larger series, and I guess human history. Always the innocent are the first victims, he said. So it has been for ages past, so it is now. I mean, because it's still going back. We're having this like undertone of, we have Mars, it's very bright, war, thinking about what's to come. I don't know. And
I thought about that quote a lot too. It's an interesting quote. I kind of was trying to play around with it of like, I don't know, it's true, but when does the line get crossed to somebody who's not innocent being involved? I don't know. It's an interesting and good quote, and it's thought provoking for sure. It's like, oh, the innocent are involved, and then what? The guilty become involved.
Well, I guess maybe the targeted,
right?
Or, you know, other people are just.
Well, they choose to be involved. Yeah. So we have a couple more chapters.
2 more chapters. Yep. Harry's number 1 suspect is still Snape. We have 2 more chapters to find out what happens.
Severus. Dumbledore giving back the cloak. It's just so
we don't
funny.
know that.
No, it's his script.
Oh, it is his script.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we're
that,
supposed to interpret it.
Yeah.
Because it's like she actually handwrites it, and it's the same as the note at Christmas, and it just says like.
Yeah, but Harry doesn't know who gave it to him at this point. He just knows that
he needs to
he
do
was
some
told to use it
forensic
wisely.
analysis on the handwriting. Yeah. Well, I'm excited.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll definitely be done by the end of the year.
Very sure.
Time's out good.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, do you add anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Until next time, Juan's ready.